Let's do that. Let's see if that worked. Usually I have a live feed. Now, I don't know what's happening. Hold on for a sec. Let's see if I can get it on the other one. Bear with us here. You guys are out there, just enjoy that. Let's see if I can actually get this going.
Maybe YouTube is stopping it because I'm playing all these copyrighted tunes so perfectly.
I don't know. I mean, it's weird. Mess with it a little bit more. It says that I'm streaming. Let's see, is this thing going? Can anyone hear me? Oh, it says we're live.
Yo, you can play multiple things. That's nice.
Oh, now it sees us. That's weird. Can anyone see us? Is anybody watching? Let's see. Oh, we have an excellent connection. I don't know why it's not coming through on... I don't know if anybody's out there. Let's see. Are we... It says we're broadcasting. I have sound. Anybody out there? Do we have any of our regular viewers? Cameron or... Connie? Anyone? Oh, you know why? I see why. I see why.
We're still learning.
I know why. Public. Done. Save. All right, now I'm gonna bet that someone is gonna see us now. Aha, we're live. We're live, we're live. Anyone out there? Can you guys hear us now? Hello, hello, hello. Well, I can hear myself over the interwebs. Cancel. Let's see. Which? Oh, there we go. All right. Weird. Let's see. Is anybody out there? I guess nobody's watching.
Are they not impressed by my kalimba playing?
I guess nobody's watching today. There's only me. And I bet you if I click... Oh, there you go, guys. Ah, hi, Connie.
Oh, man. Were they watching the whole time?
I mean, I don't know. No, because I just made it public again. Somehow it got switched over to private. Hey, Connie. Sorry about that. I don't know what's happening now, but hopefully this will still work. YouTube is messing with me these days. Can you hear us, Connie? Are we all loud and clear? Can you hear Kevin's musical stylings? All right, good. All right, let's go. Are you going to do, Connie, are you going to do some push-ups with us today? I wish we could, maybe we should start these doing Zoom concurrently.
That'd be a lot.
Why?
I don't have to talk to multiple people.
What?
I don't think I have the brain space to both do all the
It's a
push-ups
kalimba.
and talk to
Sure, why don't you show Connie the kalimba?
But I just put it away.
I know, we'll take it out. Put it, I mean, sorry, we were having technical difficulties, so.
I got bored.
Got a new toy.
Yeah, I got this because my.
Hold it up to the camera so they can actually see.
No, they can't. I don't know if anyone can see. Ocarinas are too loud, so I got this.
That's pretty cool. I think, you know what? I think I remember like my grandfather had one of those.
What?
I think that's true.
Fancy.
I
It
mean,
sounds like
my grandfather was a very talented person.
human being.
Huh?
He sounds like a respected, awesome human being.
My grandfather? I think he was pretty respected as a matter of fact. I think he was a,
Well, obviously he has a kalimba, so it makes sense.
I mean, it all, I'm not sure that's why he
Totally
was
possible.
respected.
I'm sure he got the kalimba, and then
That
all
was the
respect-
reason why, that he was respected all of a sudden.
It started pouring in. Or I just want to be the guy outside of the jazz cafe playing a kalimba.
Is that where kalimba players like to congregate? Outside of jazz cafes? I'm pretty sure that's not where I would go if I were a kalimba player.
In my
Waiting
experience,
for your kalimba big break.
the people who are outside of jazz cafes have either guitars or bongos, or have you seen those like pianos that you blow into?
What do they call those? The mouth. They're called like mouth something. Yes,
Yeah.
I do. The Hooters. Do you know who the Hooters are?
I've been there. They have good wings.
Not that Hooters.
Oh.
There was a band back in the '80s called the Hooters.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and one of them had the I forget what it's called.
How'd they pull that name off? Wasn't that taken by them?
No, apparently not.
Oh, interesting. I guess Hooters is a newer concept than I thought it was. Also, I need a better way of keeping track of how many sets I've done, because my brain is in a good way. Can I use yours?
I don't think you want to use my grade. That's definitely not enough grade over whatever you're operating with right now. I definitely am using an older model. A lot of wear and tear on it.
Yeah, but it's reliable.
I mean, is it though? I'm pretty sure it's not. If you ask my wife or my kids about my powers of recall, I think they will tell you that it ain't what it used to be. Although I'd have to say, it really hasn't changed that much. Like, I've always been a pretty forgetful person.
I mean, do your kids really know, like,
Oh, yeah.
they have a comparative basis? Has it been a recent decline?
Probably. I mean, the problem with having memory loss is that
You don't.
you don't really notice it that much because everything seems like it's fine. That's my greatest fear.
The toad and the boiling water analogy?
Yeah.
Like, just gradual, day by day. You're just like...
I could actually be living in the home right now, just like imagining this whole thing.
Wouldn't that be weird? You could be a...
I hope my time in the home is like this. This is great.
That'd be fun. A butterfly dreaming of being a Rich Jackson.
That's like the new thing in like a lot of science fiction TV series is like this alternate reality that you don't really know that you're living in, right? And that goes back to the Matrix and probably
Further
Further
than
than that.
ever since the cave wall thing, right?
what? Yeah, I mean that's a platonic thing.
Oh yes, but is
The
that
Greeks knew all about that.
were you secretly leading into that?
What? No,
Oh, okay, sorry.
it was
That's
not.
just
But it
my-
is true. I did think of that. You know, like when I was reading. You know, the funniest thing about the cave that people don't like. If you read this, the story of the cave, the parable of the cave is very short. But the part how it ends is actually, I just reread it because now I'm doing research on Plato. I have a lot of time on my hands. When I'm not playing Hearthstone and doing push-ups.
I'm Rich Jackson. I just reread the cave.
I mean, it's very short. It's like 3 pages long.
Yeah, but okay. Go ahead. How does it end?
Well, hold on.
Did they end up joining up with machines to fight
Yes.
Idiot Smith?
No, so the thing is like, so they drag this guy. So first of all, you know, these are people that were chained, so they can only, it actually reminded me of Clockwork Orange, if you ever watched that movie.
Yeah,
They're chained and they can only face the wall. And there's the dim fire, right, that's casting shadows, and there are people who are totally messing with the chained people against the wall by like bringing shadow, like things that will cast a shadow. And making sounds sometimes, like, so, you know, you think that this shadow of a thing is like a real sheep because they make sheep sounds. So just think of like how sick it is to chain people up for their whole lives, forcing them to look at a cave wall. This is a very elaborate scheme that you have to come up with. Right? Just imagine that you're this person.
But it sounds more like a metaphor.
Well, we're getting to that, but it is a metaphor. But part of the metaphor is that you have captors who are actively effing with you. Right? It's not, these are not like, oh, we just don't know any better, we're just staring at these images on the wall, which I always kind of thought it was.
They control the images.
There's an active power of some sort that is actively messing with you. So anyway, they decide, the people that are perpetrating this fraud decide that it's too boring to do that, and they get one of the prisoners, and they bring them up through the cave. Right, and this guy has dim, he's a cutter, spent his whole life in this dim cave.
Tom Hanks, Castaway.
Right, they bring him up, and he's like, first of all, he's like, doesn't want to go up. He doesn't know what's happening.
Yeah.
Right, and then they bring him upstairs into the bright shiny light. He can't see anything.
Yeah.
Like he's blinded. He's never seen the sun before. Right. So then, he's staring at the ground because he can't lift his eyes. He keeps his eyes closed for like who knows how long, and eventually he's able to open them up. And he still can't look around because the sun is too bright. But after a time, he gets accustomed and acclimated to the sunlight. He's able to look almost, and then eventually directly into the sun and see the light of truth, right? Like that's the metaphor.
And he goes insane.
No. It's even better than that. So then he decides, I'm going to go back down into the cave and I'm going to tell everybody about the truth, like what I've seen, that they're seeing are lies, essentially.
That's what it said.
So then he goes back down into the cave, and because now he's been blinded by the light of day, he goes back to the cave and he can barely see anything.
Yeah.
Right. So he goes back down there, and he's like sits back down with his buddy, who are still chained to the wall, facing forward, and he starts talking about like this is all lies.
Crazy.
Right? There's something, but he can't see anything, so they make fun of him because he can't see anything.
Yeah.
Right? So he can't even speak. So they're still seeing these images. They play a game. They play a game that is like, guess what this is, or what is it? And they talk about what are these images. But he can't play that game anymore because
he's insane.
Because he's seen the light of day and reason.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So at the end, this is Socrates who's asking questions of his students, about like, well, what do you think would happen here, blah, blah, blah. So then he says, what do you think would happen if this guy, who no longer can see, right, he has no credibility, because he can't actually even play the game that these people have all been playing for their whole lives. He's babbling about what reality is, and what do you think would happen if he tries to bring them up to the light of the cave?
They resist, of course.
Don't you think they would try to kill him? And that's what they, it's like, yes, of course, no doubt, they would try to kill that person. Because he has seen the light, but they can no longer relate to him.
Bro.
So,
bro.
Yes, bro, what?
Have you done DMT?
I don't know what that means. Are you trying to pretend like...
I don't know, the idea that...
So like the philosopher who comes back down and tries to explain to all the people like what the truth is.
Yeah, to have an
they want to murder.
To have an experience that is truly unrepresentable by human speech or transmittable by...
Not just unrepresentable, but is contrary to everything that your whole life has been.
Yeah.
Hey, there's an outdoors that you can go and look anywhere you want. There's sun, there's light. This is all lies.
When you don't have the idea of outdoors, you don't have any reference to tell people things, right?
And you have no credibility because you speak. Now you can't see anything that other people see.
Yeah.
So you're the blind one who's coming back to tell people about the truth.
Yeah.
I just thought that was an interesting, like, kind of a complete story of it. It's actually interesting than just this, what kind of filtered down to me, which was just, oh yeah, we're all like these idiots who are staring at the cave wall. You know, it's actually a very pessimistic view of what humans do when someone else tries to tell them the truth.
I don't know, but at the end of the day, like, I don't know, there's still, at least with that story, there's still kind of an idea of an absolute truth.
Yes, the sun.
Like, going outside is closer to reality than staying in the cave, right? Like,
No doubt.
and we're outside, and we're doing stuff, and we're free, right? But, like in the cave,
Or are we just all just staring at the cave?
we don't have
We're staring at the
control
wall.
of the information coming in, and we can't really fully conceptualize, like, I don't know, how little control of our environment we have. Like, we kind of have a little bit of control, but like, you can kind of, like, you can control what environment that you're in, but you can't control what happens in the environment.
You know, the funny thing about Plato too is that he was very, for someone who lived in the cradle of democracy, was very anti-democratic. You know, he was very much against the masses making any sort of decision. You know, he believed in the philosopher king, you know, the wise man who saw the truth of the light of reason, as opposed to the multitudes who are too enamored of the sensory pleasures and signals in their lives to actually make reasoned decisions. That only the wisest should rule, only the philosopher king, right? I mean, I think that's only a few can see, Kevin, and only those few should be able to rule, according to Plato.
I feel like, for me, if we're going to try to draw this metaphor with Jiu Jitsu, right? Like, I feel like when people try and teach Jiu Jitsu and systemic concepts, it's like projecting what Jiu Jitsu is on the wall and telling people that that's what Jiu Jitsu is, versus like someone who truly understands Jiu Jitsu. It's like you're going outside and you're experiencing something that is truly indescribable when it's happening the way that it should be happening. Where you're, you know, where you're being intuitive, you're not making decisions, you're acting, you're reacting, and there's just like this natural flow of things. Versus, you know, you could buy a giant poster with all of Jiu-Jitsu kind of mapped out onto it, and you'd be like, here, this is what Jiu-Jitsu is. Like, this is how you can understand Jiu-Jitsu. It's easy, right? It's in 2D, you can read it, you can gather this information. And I think people get super, super focused on the ways we try and represent Jiu-Jitsu with words and with concepts, but real Jiu-Jitsu is...
See, but that's not a Platonist idea. Plato would say that only by, that's an intellectual, only by reason could one discern the purest form of Jiu-Jitsu.
No,
Not by...
Plato was the one who defined human beings as featherless bipeds, right? And then remember Diogenes from yesterday.
I don't know any of this other stuff that you're talking about.
Diogenes goes up to Plato, he brings him a featherless chicken, and he says, behold, here's Plato's man, right? And he was trying to highlight the difficulty of trying to truly use like a verbal system such as language to parse and conceptualize something as complicated as what a human being is.
The problem
or what is complicated
is that we don't really know anything of what Diogenes said because he didn't leave behind any writings.
Yeah, it's Socrates, but you bring him up all the time.
I mean, no, I talk about that. I don't bring anything about Socrates. I barely know anything about him, but or any of these people actually. But I know less about Diogenes than I know about anybody else, probably. But my understanding, just of my brief introduction to the Cynics, was that they believed that to fulfill one's life was to live in accordance with nature as a natural person, without any kind of like affectation of, you know, material wealth
are you
or
talking
habit.
about the cynics?
The cynics, yeah. I don't know if this is true. You know, like I just read this on Wikipedia, you know, and the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy.
Of course.
I mean, which is basically.
Which is what Wikipedia said.
I mean, well, I trust the Stanford Encyclopedia more than I trust Wikipedia.
Surely.
Neither of them are suitable for, you know, academic citation purposes, but taking them at their word, and being the very amateur novice student of philosophy that I am, I don't know what Plato would say about, you know, about the process of learning, because the thing that when you were saying, when you were talking before, you know, what I was thinking was, would Plato agree or disagree, is just a question, that I could, you know, teach you what I have seen, right? I can tell it to you, right? But my suspicion is that he would disagree that you could be enlightened in that kind of secondary way, just by hearing what I had to say, right? You would have to exercise your own reason, right? And go through the process yourself, as opposed to him being able to teach it. You know what I mean?
It's not just reason though, like I feel like.
No,
like
that's,
Plato,
I'm saying, is Plato all about reason? Which
yes,
I believe it is.
I think it is, right? Like, I think Plato, for me, in my head, is the embodiment of like the left brain idea of trying to like categorize things, and
No, that's Aristotle.
and organize things in a way that you can logically express it to other people in a way that they can also organize it and understand it in a useful way, right? Versus the Diogenes is more like an intuitionalist, right? And less, he kind of like looks down on the whole idea of trying to, you know, break things up into pieces and categorize things, and like, hey,
That's probably
you
true.
know, like,
He doesn't seem like a very systematic type of guy.
like the whole endeavor is useless, right? According to him, right? Just like, you know, if you try and do something, you're always going to be able to find a flaw. So why bother, right?
But he was a philosopher, and
Yeah.
he was like a street philosopher, so he was, proselytizing
Yeah.
his view.
But I think one should have a balance between the two, right? Like, you can't
No
study
argument.
jiu-jitsu like just purely from a logical perspective, because it won't work when you're trying to use logic, right? You can't, there's not enough time to use your brain in that way, right? What you need to do is you need to function with your intuition and then afterwards analyze using your logic. It has to be this like balance where you have to understand things. You need to be able to make decisions intuitively, and that requires experience and familiarity. And that's not something that you can just parse through with logic. When jiu-jitsu is happening, you don't have time to sit there.
Hybrid?
And like
I
sometimes
don't think anybody would disagree with you.
sometimes you can sit through and think through something, but
I think you can,
should be balanced.
you know, there's a point of like, you come to it, you do it, however you learned it, that's how you arrive at it, right?
Yeah.
Whoever your instructor was, or your fellow students, or whatever your experiences are. And then you may be able to bring some order to that, some categorizations and principles.
Yeah.
And then, but yes, I mean, once you can talk about all those things, but actually being able to do them under pressure
It's different.
in competitive situations is something that has to be trained to the point where it is unthinking. Or, you know, you're not thinking about the little movements, you know. You may be thinking about your overall strategy, your game plan, but you're not, well, should I put my arm here or here?
Yeah, well, that's the weird
Should I
thing.
shift my weight from here to here, you know?
That's the cool thing about jiu-jitsu, because like, you know, whether or not you can logically explain it, it doesn't matter. It either works or it doesn't. And if it does work, you tend to look at it and try to figure out why.
I could explain jiu-jitsu to somebody.
Yeah.
I could explain football to somebody. I could explain gymnastics to somebody. The beautiful thing about explaining things is that you don't actually have to be able to do any of those things. It helps.
Yeah.
But at a certain level, at a very abstract level. But in order to do these things, you have to do them. There's no like,
Well, that's because
you know jiu-jitsu.
you can't truly explain all of, or like convey all of the information necessary to do jiu-jitsu well. You know, like all the details that people
You're right.
like are, you know, they
You're
fixate on and they're important. But, you know, a lot of the details that I do, I don't really have conceptualized into words yet. Like, it's a kind of a gradual development. Like, I do stuff, and then eventually I realize I do stuff, and then I figure out what.
Well, someone told you what to do.
It was both.
They gave you something to do.
Yeah, like
and then you
foundations are nice.
used that to some degree, had some level of experience, success, defeat, whatever, failure, and then that's an iterative process. I don't know that anybody ever.
But it's also like there is also a balance between using what you've learned in your academy and building off of what you've used with something personal, like your own individual outlook that you create based on the partners that you train with and your own individual needs, and you get like you can have a nice strong foundation or a nice like tree trunk, and then from there like your branches can kind of be a little bit off the norm, I think, like depending on what your goals are. You know, if you're going for a tournament, then maybe you should focus on like what you would probably see in a tournament. But I think most people, at least the people that I train with, train to train, you know, not necessarily
the vast bulk of people, yes, that is true.
So
they call that training for failure.
But you know, just training to train with people, and you're gonna have to. What people do in tournaments isn't always going to be sufficient for your own needs, right? Because people that you roll with aren't always going to do tournament style jiu-jitsu.
That's true.
So you're always going to have to adapt a little bit, because you know the way people roll with me, like you and I, we will roll with the same people. But the people that we roll with roll differently with you as they do with me, right?
So we're different people that do different things.
So like my answer to you isn't going to be the best or the same as
that's true. That's true. But I mean, I think I can think of people who roll pretty much the same between us, because they just roll the same.
Yeah.
You know, they're just going to do the same thing. You know, no matter what. And that could be both people who are really good and people who are really bad.
Yeah, but I feel like it's. I mean, sometimes you get two
the
people.
The really bad ones are so inexperienced that they don't know the difference between or how to adjust. And people who are really good just dictate their terms, and you just have to adjust to them.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I mean, it's hard to fault someone for being inexperienced and not knowing.
No, I'm not faulting anybody. Like, I'm just saying, like, I think in general, though, people will adjust. Like, I roll differently with you than I roll with other people, for sure. But that goes back to my original question, which is, would Plato agree or disagree that, well, maybe I should rephrase the question. I mean, if he's writing things down and he has a school of philosophy, he must believe at some level that he's able to teach people something that will get them closer to the illumination or enlightenment that he claims to have experienced himself, right?
Yeah.
So now,
but does he decide that, or does the people around him decide that? Like, he does stuff, everyone's like, this is awesome, let's have more of this now. Right?
I mean, I guess it must be a function of both, right?
Yeah.
Because he wouldn't be teaching and writing
there was people
unless he presumed that he had an audience and he had valuable information. If, on the other hand, he was just like, hey, look, guys, I'm enlightened, I can't show you the way, good luck. He wouldn't have written anything down.
That's the Diogenes approach, where like he's sleeping on the streets with dogs, and you know, it was like King Alexander or something, like comes
Alexander
down,
the Great.
Alexander the Great comes down, he's like,
that's apocryphal.
How are you doing?
Do you know that story? I read that story.
Yeah.
Did you tell the people how it goes?
Alright, so Alexander the Great, he just like conquers the city, whatever the one that Diogenes is in. And he had heard.
I think it's Athens. He's in Athens.
No, I don't think it was Athens.
He was in Athens. Well, he may have been
kicked out of Athens.
No, he was kicked out of his other city.
For this city, I think it was something else.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't know, but so Alexander the Great looks for and finds Diogenes, and he's like, hey, I'm the coolest guy around here. I hear you're really cool. I want to show my respect to you. What can I give you? And Diogenes is like, you know, you can get out of my life.
You're blocking my son, bro.
Yeah, so Alexander the Great's like, you know, if I weren't Alexander the Great, if I could be anyone on this planet, it would be this guy, Diogenes. And I don't know.
And what does Diogenes say?
He's like something like, I would be me too.
Yeah. He's like, totally, I mean, that's total bullshit, but.
But like, it's a nice idea where a person doesn't cling to anything, like any sort of idea that is intangible, you know, like.
That is tangible.
Yeah, sorry, any
Or
idea.
maybe, no, maybe it is intangible.
Like he gives up social etiquette, he gives up, you know, all these other sorts of like social rules that make him an outcast, but he's like trying to highlight how just like unimportant he thinks they are, right? And I feel like I kind of resonate with that because like I was brought up really.
Please don't start pooping and peeing on everything.
Oh, I was brought up under like really structured rules of like what jiu-jitsu is and what jiu-jitsu should be, and I appreciate that outlook, but also like for me, jiu-jitsu should be a way to break away from that a little bit and kind of push the envelope or push the test whether or not widely held ideas are true. You know, like certain meta rules in jiu-jitsu, like never cross your feet while in the
Yeah, but
back.
that was an old one. That doesn't work
You know,
anymore.
but like there are little things like that where like there are these rules are the ways that like people expect you to act, and by understanding these you can take advantage of it and
Yes.
like kind of
Yes.
use the rules against a person.
This is true.
But like another way would be there are some people who like this approach where they don't go to any classes at all. They're just gonna go to open mat all the time.
Yeah.
And just like their grappling is completely just a natural development. And some would say that that isn't the best way to do it, right?
Who would
and-
say such a thing? I don't know anybody like that that would
Right?
ever say.
I mean, but that's my earlier point was, you know, like left brain Plato, right brain Diogenes. Like good jujitsu is somewhere in between, where like you're not just conceptualizing and analyzing technique in videos, and you're not
yeah,
just
that's
like
true. That's true. I
you
don't
know,
think
just-
anybody would argue with that.
completely over here, and you're not also like, you know, just a filthy jujitsu degenerate, not showing up to any technical classes and not thinking about jujitsu at all. Because like you shouldn't overthink it, but you shouldn't underthink it too. You should, I don't know,
I don't know anyone.
have some ideas.
I can't think of anyone who is that. There's no one at either extreme, right? There's no jiu-jitsu brainiac who, you know, is physically feeble and yet has an encyclopedic knowledge of all jiu-jitsu, you know?
No, but I knew.
And is successful.
No, that's the thing. I've trained with guys who they would come in and they would kind of do technique. They would do it a couple times and they would roll pretty good. And they'd go home and watch 4 hours of video.
Yes, they're probably not going to do it.
Like, they knew so much, so many things that they couldn't do. And it was,
Yes.
they were really fun to talk to because they knew all this stuff, like about the culture
Yes.
and all the
For
memes
sure.
and all this fun stuff, but like, they couldn't do basic movements. And
Yes, this is
they're-
true.
it's like, in that case, there needs to be a balance shift away from the conceptual.
I think it kind of goes like, it goes in the beginning, depending on how much time you have. You generally spend more time training, right? Usually.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not always true, but you spend more time just being on the mat training all the time. And then as you get older, you start talking more. I think that's how it works.
Yeah.
Because you get injured more, you have more downtime, you know? And then, you know, as the kids get better and better, you know, I don't know, I think your ability to your training volume
Yeah.
or your training capacity goes down. You know, some people can train, right? Like there's a point where, you know, some people can train, you know, for 10 hours a day, for months on end, with or without medical assistance on it, right? But there comes a time, no matter what your medical, you know, or chemical regimen is, or your just natural sturdiness will diminish. And then you won't have as much time to train, you know? It's just it's the inevitability of getting old
What is really
and
nice
injured.
about the conceptualization process is you can kind of break up jiu-jitsu. Like if you understand the overall system, you can start seeing patterns and break them up into ways that I don't know how to phrase this, but what's the like compressing information in data, right? Where I could have like a move, like the backpack grip, right? The backpack grip, at first we think about, like, or the seatbelt grip. We have this seatbelt grip to take me back, right? simple concept, but when you first learn it, you always associate it with the back, right? But, right, if you start thinking about it and conceptualizing it in a different way, the seatbelt can appear in different ways, right? Not just like on the back here, can I borrow you?
No, you can't take my back
Right?
this low.
But the seatbelt also works in this orientation here,
Oh, ooh.
right? And it's the same thing, right? It's just upside down, right?
Actually, you're still the same.
Yeah, well, it's
Okay.
like,
No, it's the same.
I'm doing the same thing.
You're taking your
Yeah, I've got
from one
like,
to the other.
I've got one arm and I've got my arms connected here, right? And I've got these things that keep them kind of locked in this position.
Yes.
And then what else?
It's a girl.
Right? Here.
Oh.
If I get here, same thing.
It's true.
Right? So instead of thinking about like techniques where it's like I do this and I do this and I do this, then it's like I look for seatbelts in this position.
Right,
I look for
yeah,
seatbelts in
yeah.
that position. I look for
How do I
seatbelts in
use
that
this
position.
concept across different
And then-
scenarios,
and
physical
just-
positions?
Just the little differences between each seatbelt gets you little differences on how the techniques branch off from there.
It's
And
true.
so if you can have like one thing that works in a lot of different places, you can really lower the amount of overall information you need to convey
Yes.
to a person to have them have a functional game.
Yes.
It's
It's true.
And the more you can do this with not just like macro ideas like seatbelt, but like small ideas like swimming in or like leg dragging or just like the ways that the legs can be entangled and just like so many different things.
Well, when I think about, coaches, the best coaches are usually the people who are not competitors anymore, or maybe never were competitors really at a high level, and especially the people who maybe they played in a Division I context at a small school or whatever, but they weren't like the stars of the team. They were able to succeed even at their modest level because they were smart. Like they figured out the game. They had to have a good game IQ is what they would call it, right? Now, if you can pass that on to somebody who is a total beast, stud, who's willing to be coached, now you're going to have a real problem. Everyone else is going to have a real problem on their hands.
So you just save a lot on time. But sometimes I don't know, it is nice to go through the process of doing bad jujitsu.
I think, well, it's nicer when you do that when you're young.
Yeah.
Nowadays, I think the new norm in jiu-jitsu is almost a meteoric rise. Or at least a perception of meteoric rise.
Yeah.
Like the kids who are we talk about them 15, 14, 17, whatever they are. If they've been training since they were 7, they have 8 years of training under their belts. Now, you could say but it's just training with kids, with other kids. But
Still 8 years of training.
that is still 8, and I remember when I started training, there were lots of holes, situations that we didn't really know what to do with.
Yeah.
And
You just
nowadays
think
there are
those-
very few holes.
Yeah.
And like you said, people are. I think the amount of knowledge has exploded.
Oh yeah.
But also how it's been codified and organized and how it's taught now is much, much, much better.
Yeah.
It's much better. And it's kind of like what you're saying, where these concepts, like when for John's instructionals, every instructional series is like one volume of concepts,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of them are repeats. A lot of them are the same idea or concept, and that could be a physical thing or we talk about fundamentals a lot, and we just always talk about, we make fun of it, right? Wedges and accessing the end of the lever. But it's one thing to talk about using leverage, in a general concept, here where I'm using leverage, and it's another thing to say, this is how you maximize the leverage in any given situation.
Yeah.
That is helpful information,
I used to get mad because sometimes leverage is overused like a magic word in jiu-jitsu. Just if they don't know what's really happening mechanically, they're just oh, this works because of leverage.
It's leverage.
It's
leverage.
No, not necessarily. Kind of maybe, but I don't know. There are other ways that things
I'm just
work
using that as
in
an
jiu-jitsu
example.
besides leverage.
I'm using that as
Sorry.
an example.
That was just an aside. That was an
The triangle, the wedge,
It's any simple machine that.
And,
can
well,
be
that's, I mean,
invoked.
this is the,
Yeah.
it's physics, Kevin.
But like all simple machines use leverage. I'm aware of that. But you know, it would be nice to have a little bit of precision in the language.
No, but I mean, I'm saying like instead of saying use leverage
Yeah,
here,
he's good at-
he's saying like
It's very
this is
specific.
how you are,
Yeah.
and also you know a good sense of like how the body works,
Yeah.
how your body works, how their body works. You know, it's
He's very particular in the way he says things.
it's all very teased out, like and developed,
Yeah.
as opposed to the old way, which was just
Do
put your
this.
leg here, your leg there, and just try to use as much muscle as you can.
Because it's so, jiu-jitsu is so hard to teach. Because like, can
No,
I show you why?
you're sweaty.
Let me show you.
I know why.
Why?
Why don't you just say
No,
use your
alright,
words?
'cause like,
know.
well, I don't know how to use my words.
What technique are you gonna show?
It was gonna be neon belly. Can I borrow?
No, I'll put knee on your belly.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Alright,
What is
so
your-
if he's neon bellying me, right? Let's say he has like this underhook here, and he's got this what's the over tie? No, collar tie here, right? And he's just chilling, right?
I never chill here.
Versus
I
when
will be
he's
striking as hard as I can.
versus when he's driving his knee as hard as he can into me. Like, go ahead, like with all the underhooks, right? And like he's trying to kill me. Like these look very similar,
Yeah,
but they're very different.
that's very different. Two different things.
And like you can't, like through a book or even when you're
No.
showing a technique, you can't show
Right.
how much pressure
Yeah.
is happening. Can we make that a pressure-sensitive woven gi that like changes color the more you stretch it? That'd be pretty cool. Anyway, right?
Or you
Like-
can just put the knee on the person's belly and be like, feel
well,
the
I mean,
difference.
some people, some instructors, and I tend to do this sometimes. They go to like, okay, like I can't convey all of the information, so I'm gonna simplify it, and like a neon
Yes.
belly just becomes, when you teach it, a neon belly instead of like all of the different ways that you could show pressure, right?
Well, pressure is something I think that you can't show.
You can talk about.
You can talk about it, but
It's
it has
so-
to be felt and
You can't. It's very, very difficult to convey all of the information necessary
Yes.
to recreate the pressure exactly how you're doing it. Like, who's the guy with the hands that heroes that he always brings in? Abraham.
yeah, Marte.
Yeah. Right. Like he
But
taught
he's a
a seminar.
huge dude anyway,
He
right?
taught
Like,
a
he's a big
seminar.
boy.
He could tell you everything that he does, but you're never going to do the things
Yes.
that he's doing because
That's
you
true.
don't know what he's doing because he can't tell you what he's doing. He can give you an idea. He can show you helpful hints. He can show your partner how it should feel.
Yeah.
But he can never tell you how
Right.
to do it.
Right.
And that's
Yes, that is true.
I think that's important to understand. But if you focus on that, you're not going to get anywhere. So just like learn what you can where you can. But you're
I mean,
gonna
you
have
can-
you're gonna have to fill in the gaps yourself.
You can look at people and kind of see where they are. It's funny, you watch. I watch these tournaments and you see these guys who have unbelievable pressure. They don't look that big necessarily.
Yeah.
And like Kennedy Masael, at one point at Cabrina's son, he passed Gio Martinez guard, right?
Yeah.
At who's number one last weekend, right? And then Gino Martinez is really good.
Mm.
He's really good. He's the elite level guy. He passes his guard, and Kennedy Masael's like 160 pounds. Gio's like 150 or something, not that much bigger. And Kennedy just puts so much pressure, like so much downward pressure, that it's kind of like you kind of look at it, and he doesn't look any different than any other cross-side, like kind of pin.
Mm.
But I've had enough people, even if it's smaller than him, put that pressure down, where to the point where I can't move, right? Like I have to wait till this person wants to move, right? I'm not going to get out of here. You can't communicate. Like I don't know how they put so much pressure down, and to the point where they can immobilize another elite level guy. That's no joke, like.
But it's also like it's hard to understand as well because for every person you do that technique to, you have to make small little
Yes.
changes depending on the person and how their bodies are put together. So like the way you do this awesome technique is going to change every time you do it a little bit.
And then the other thing is that usually sometimes they just hold you down.
Uh-huh.
Other times they're holding you down, but there is a way out. It's
Yeah.
not the good way, right? Like,
Yeah.
could somebody just like explode out? Maybe.
Maybe.
Yes, but then you'd have him on your back, right? Or he'd have you in a guillotine or whatever. So sometimes it doesn't look like, or doesn't even feel like there's that much pressure. Like, I'm always suspicious whenever anybody's on top of me and they're not putting down a lot of weight. Like, I'm not going anywhere real fast.
Really?
Not usually.
Mm.
Depends on the situation, like how, and you feel how good people are.
Yeah.
But if they're good and they're letting me go somewhere, I'm always like, why is that guy letting me go there? Like they want me to do something that I know is kind of fishy. Now, in competition, that may be your only chance,
Yeah.
but that's what happens, right? Like, that's how you get your back taken.
Like, sometimes it's a trap, sometimes it's not a trap, but sometimes it's not a trap, but oh, it's actually a trap. And then,
Or you're just giving the person an opportunity. Like, maybe they don't have any
yeah,
clue, but you go in that direction
it's still a bad idea.
and they just do something weird.
But you shouldn't be, that's not true. You should sometimes be afraid of moving, but I don't know.
I mean, sometimes you don't have any choice, right? In competition,
In competition,
you have to move.
move.
Yeah.
In training though, like,
No, you don't.
I just.
That's
I'll-
why I can sit there and be
I'll-
suspicious.
I'll
That's why.
wait- I'll wait until.
That's why training is not competition,
Yeah.
right? Unless you're keeping score and it's meaningful to you, right? Because you don't.
I guess. I don't know.
I had a guy. This was 5, 6, 7 years ago, and he was passing my guard, and he kind of had a knee cut, and he clears his leg or his foot for like a second.
Mm-hmm.
I re-guard him. He gets his advantage. And then he gets it out again. I re-guard him. He gets his advantage. And then he just sits there for like 3, I forget, it was like 4 minutes.
Yeah.
Of just him
Strategy.
sitting there.
Yeah.
And because I was already like this way on him, he wouldn't even let me move to turtle to take my back. He just kind of camped on me for the whole time.
This is what tournaments are done.
And I don't, like, look, yeah, like, that's the smart move. I don't fault him for doing that, but you would never do that for 4 minutes in a regular roll.
I mean, that's the thing. So I guess that brings it into question. Do you think tournament jiu-jitsu is a truer representation of true jiu-jitsu, or is like academy jiu-jitsu a better representation? Where it's like you don't necessarily have to have a time limit. You don't
It depends
necessarily
on the
have to
academy.
have
It depends on
points.
how you're training. I will say this, that the people who generally, my sense is that people who are competing are training more and training harder than the people who are not competing.
But in my head, the purpose of jiu-jitsu is to hunt for submissions, right? And then in this case, where you're getting your 2 advantages and you sit there, that's not hunting for submissions. That's hunting for a win to get to the next round.
I've never, and again, this is just my anecdotal experience, right? I've never seen anybody who was like awesome at competition, and then they would come into the academy and you would just like tool them up because we don't count points here, bro. Like, usually the guys that are really good at competition are really good on the mat, period. You know what I mean? Whereas the guys who are really good on the mat aren't always great competitors. I mean, I've met guys that are great on the mat too who never compete. But would they be, and so your question is, what's the pure form of jiu-jitsu?
But you're like, oh, but that wouldn't work in a tournament. But your reason that it wouldn't work in a tournament because of this like meta rules bull crap. Like, I don't know. Then why do I need to care
I
if
think
it wouldn't work in a
well,
tournament?
here we go. I'll say this. Again, it depends on what your purpose is. Like, what is your definition of jiu-jitsu? If your definition of jiu-jitsu is like, hey, I feel good and like I'm creative and this is a great, just being happy on the mat, well then just training for the sake of training is beautiful, right? Like, I'm not saying that's wrong or bad. I don't believe in one pure jiu-jitsu. But if your goal is, let's say it's self-defense, well, just rolling around here is probably not preparing you for a real self-defense situation. Whereas I would say competitive jiu-jitsu in the sense that those guys, they're lifting weights, they have to be explosive. Like, I think there's more of a stress on athleticism in competitive jiu-jitsu. And I think that athleticism would translate better into like more self-defense, like a one-on-one fight situation.
What? That goes against everything that the common, like, everyone's like, oh, like, gi jiu-jitsu, IBJJF would never work because of points, and it wouldn't work on the street. All you guys do is pull guard, right?
I think those are,
And then
guys who I know who compete,
yeah, But
they're gonna mess you up. They would mess you up in a
I mean,
fight.
they could, but I mean, I think the commonly held idea is, you know, if all that you train is like point scoring, butt scooting, entangling 50-50, tournament jujitsu, tournament style jujitsu that you need to train in order to be successful in a tournament, then how is that necessarily preparing you for self-defense, getting good at 50-50?
I mean, if all you
which
do
is
is
necessary to
50-50,
be
maybe,
successful.
but
No, but like you need to invest that 50-50 time if you're going to be on a competition team probably, or else they'll be like, not very good.
I mean, I think it always. I mean, look. I mean, are there guys who don't compete who are tough as nails and could just wreck anybody in a real fight? Yes, absolutely, for sure. If we're generalizing across like the whole art, you know, like everybody. I mean, and also no jiu-jitsu really accounts for like striking, or very little. Very little. Maybe there's some people who just
how
train
many
striking.
people
I do
are
jiu-jitsu.
punching you in your day-to-day life that you need to?
I'm just saying, if your goal is X, if I'm a police officer and I come to jiu-jitsu because I think it's going to help me in my job, which I think it would, right? Is if that person trains for tournament jiu-jitsu, right? How do they? Maybe it's a question more of like less about. Maybe it's less about whether it's tournament or whatever, more about like how does that person train it?
I think
Because you could be a total beast and compete in a way that would make sense from a real fighting perspective. I don't have to pull guard and do 50-50.
yeah. But like also people don't want to focus their lives on self-defense. Like I want to do a thing
If you're a
that's
police
gonna like
officer, you might.
yeah, but like maybe. But I want something that will get me good at self-defense, but also something that won't make me hate my life. And if I have to go to self-defense seminars every weekend to get good at self-defense, I don't want to get good at
Some people want
self-defense.
that
I want to
stuff.
get shot in the face.
Some people only care about self-defense, like they just care about fighting. Like, hey, I just want to do this for MMA or some other form of fighting.
Fighting's different.
That's it.
Fighting's different. If we're
That's
talking
what I'm saying.
self-defense though, like if you go to an academy and train realistically and authentically, try and get better, I think that will be just as effective as going to a self-defense class.
Depends on self-defense class.
And it won't be a self-defense class, so bonus, right? Like you get to get better at self-defense, but you don't have to hang out with self-defense people, which are the worst.
That's a whole different thing.
It's I don't know, like there should be a healthy balance, right? I don't want to only get good at self-defense. I want to get good at self-defense, and I want to
you're
have some
you're
friends
looking
that
at it
get
through the
fed.
lens, through your lens.
No, like I'm trying to look through an average person lens, and the average person doesn't want to spend 4 days a week learning self-defense.
That's true, but the question is, like, if you're going to ask the question of, like, what is the purest form of jiu-jitsu?
Yeah.
I mean, my sense is that there is no
self-defense-
such thing. If you're going to ask,
Really?
I don't believe in a pure form of jiu-jitsu.
Huh.
All right? There may be many pure forms of jiu-jitsu depending on what your purposes are. If there's jiu-jitsu that suits your purpose or suits your goals, and there probably is a best way to do jiu-jitsu for any particular goal. There's certainly less than optimal ways of doing jiu-jitsu for your particular goal. Right?
But like goals change over time, right?
Well,
So,
I
like,
mean, whatever your goal
jiu-jitsu
is in a moment, if you can identify your goal in that moment,
Uh-huh.
there is probably a more or less ideal way to go about reaching your goal.
Jiu-jitsu specific goals.
Or whatever, yeah.
Yeah.
Any goal. If I want to be a lawyer, there's a good way to become a lawyer, right?
So-
There's an ideal way to train to become a lawyer. There's also a less than ideal way that you could say, yes, this is actually helping me become a lawyer, but is not the ideal way to actually become a lawyer.
But then how do you tell when things aren't jiu-jitsu?
But we're getting into another thing.
Oh.
That's a whole different. I don't know what that is.
Well,
That's a whole different.
just like if you don't have an idea of what jiu-jitsu is, then you don't have an idea of what jiu-jitsu isn't.
Now, that's why I say goals,
Oh.
right? Your goal, and I'm talking more about a goal or a purpose specific. It's teleological.
Why does jiu-jitsu?
Is the fancy word for
Does
it.
jiu-jitsu have to be goal-oriented?
No.
Like, because
Well,
what if your goal is just to be good
they
at
have no
jiu-jitsu?
goals. That's a goal.
No, I'm just like, I want to be good at jiu-jitsu. That's my goal. Today I want to be better at jiu-jitsu than I was yesterday.
I mean, but that is a better in what context? Your context is you enjoy
Better than this.
the training academy environment, or
Better
the
than-
academy training
I
environment.
also enjoy improving the academy and the students, but personally, like.
So that's a very specific kind of jujitsu,
Yeah.
right?
It's
So
very,
it-
very.
So you could say, I want to get better in jiu-jitsu, and mean it in the sense of like, hey, we're not keeping score here, and I'm not under the pressure of a time limit, and
Well,
you know, I'm not going to have my failure or success is not going to be determined by how many matches I win in the next hour.
I determine failure and success by like aha moments. Like a good training session is one where something happens and you're like, oh.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, there's nothing that's a fine goal, right? Like, okay.
But it's really hard to make that a goal because sometimes those don't happen ever.
That's fine. I mean, there's a lot of things. I can make it my goal to win the world championships. That's a fine goal. It's unlikely to happen, right? But that doesn't even mean, even the fact that it's unlikely, if someone were to say to me, I want to train like a world champion, right? But they have no chance of ever being a world champion, that may still be a laudable goal. That
Yeah.
you would get
Just
a
like,
lot better by
I wanna-
training for that
I
purpose,
want to train like a world champion. That's a good goal.
right? And or it might be a terrible goal. That person may, you know, have a heart attack because they're just so physically ill-fitted for the task at hand.
But at least like it's something to work towards.
You know, the thing is you could say like there are goals that are more amorphous and goals that are more
Well,
concrete.
because that's like if your goal is I want to train like a world champion, that's a lot different than I want to be a world champion. You know, because like
Yes.
I want to train like a world champion is attainable. Like you can do that. Like
Yes.
if you work hard, no matter what, you can do that thing. Provided you don't die or something else happens.
Yes.
But like that's a thing that can happen. Versus like I want to be a world champion. You can work your butt off, and that might not happen. That might not necessarily be a great goal, but both of these goals, though different, should have the same result, right? Where like, because in order to be a world champion, you have to train like a world champion.
Yes. But not everyone who trains like a world champion will be
Becomes
a world champion.
But everyone who wants to train like a
They
champion
would.
is able to
Well,
train like a champion.
I mean, and I think this is why a lot of people are naturally attracted to training with high-level competitors, right? Or being around high-level, because you're like, oh, well, you know, there's Henzo on the mat,
Yeah.
you know, and there's Gordon Ryan on the mat. And if I get to train with them, I'm literally training with a world champion,
Yeah, it's awesome.
right? And by training with them and doing what they tell me to do, I'm
Yeah.
being coached by a world champion or whatever, you know, like,
Yeah.
there is a benefit, even if you never set foot on the mat, or you only compete at the lowest level tournament or whatever. You know, you go and you only win. You know, you don't ever win a match. You're still at least
You've got like an idea.
you are getting. You know, you're getting an experience. You're getting a level of instruction experience on a level that maybe you wouldn't have ever even thought possible in yourself, right? And you might get results that are surprising, or you would hope that it would be better than if you just like watched videos at home and try to do what they did, right?
Yeah.
So, but I think the question of what is like would training for sport jiu-jitsu, I think it really depends on the individual. I think there are some individuals you could train in a way that really wouldn't prepare you, that would be very good for sport jiu-jitsu and might get you win you a lot of matches, but wouldn't be in any way applicable or very. It would be far. If you said I want to be able to defend myself in a real fight.
Yeah.
Like there are lots of ways of training in sport jiu-jitsu that would not be directly applicable to a real fight. By the same token, there are competitors who have a game that is directly applicable to a real fight.
Yeah, but they're not at the tippity top. You know, they're like.
Yeah, but we're not. Don't go to the extremes. Like, don't make it absurd, right? Like, yes, you're right.
Fair.
There are people like look. We talked about Gordon Ryan yesterday. I'll just give an example, just because this is kind of how he plays his game.
Yeah.
The first thing, not always. He'll usually stand up a little bit, but eventually, what does he do? He sits to guard.
Yeah.
That is not a good general strategy for most people in a fist fight, right?
Sure. But
So that would be an example, just in isolation, that would be an example of a technique or a strategy that, hey, look, maybe you could make it work. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I would not tell the general public that, hey, just do what Gordon Ryan does because, hey, he's a 2-time Abu Dhabi champion. You know?
I've totally sat guard in a bar fight, by the way.
Maybe you have. But,
Totally worked.
okay.
Daily
I'm not saying
ego.
it's impossible. That
All the time. All the way.
But you know why? Maybe if it did work, it's because you're so like long.
No, it's because I fell.
You didn't pull in. You just fell.
No, I fell and then I pulled.
I mean, it's still good to, you know, like have a good guard.
Yeah.
Like you should. I mean, that's like one of the fundamental premises of jiu-jitsu is like you may fall down, or the person may take you down. You may wind up on your back. You should
99% of bar fights
go to the ground one way or the other. So you should. I mean, that's the idea, right? Like the person is gonna one way or the other. You might wind up on your back.
Yeah.
So you should be able to operate from there. But the starting position, I've never seen anyone say, "Hey, just come out and sit down."
Yeah.
That's all.
But
I'm saying.
like they never expect it.
Yeah, they would be confused by that.
Yeah.
You know, but on the other hand, you have guys that are just, you know, like they're aggressive. They do not sit down. They're always going to play for top position. You know, they have really good takedown game. That is a good. I mean, maybe that doesn't get you to the world championships or to the first place finish, but those skills I think are more applicable or transferable.
I guess. I just don't feel like self-defense has anything to do with jiu-jitsu personally. Like jiu-jitsu didn't start off as a self-defense art. It started off as a come to our school and we'll beat you up in front of everybody art. You know, we're gonna do a one-on-one fight. We're gonna go to the beach, circle around.
I think you're confusing
fight.
the marketing for the reality. I mean, the samurai were using jiu-jitsu for all.
No, because jiu-jitsu comes from judo, not from the samurai. And judo, again, one-on-one match.
From
Judo
jiu-jitsu.
can come from wherever it wants to come from. Jiu-jitsu comes from judo. Judo was a one-on-one fight-ish competition thing, right? It's not like a self-defense
But you
situation.
can't say that jiu-jitsu comes from judo and then not acknowledge that judo comes from
I can,
jiu-jitsu.
but I'm acknowledging that when they do judo, it's not like someone is like coming up from behind them and sucker punching them to start the match. That would be more of a self-defense situation. Doesn't really happen in judo. When they train judo, they train in a one-on-one context, right? Sure, you could say that you can train judo and judo will help you with your
Judo
self-defense.
has a self-defense curriculum.
I'm sure it does.
So
But when they were, I don't know.
They had a
actually
striking
might-
curriculum.
I don't know how they train judo, but I don't know. Now I have to think about it. Dang. But let me get back.
I mean, I think you certainly can approach jiu-jitsu or anything in a number of different ways. I mean, I think you could look at jiu-jitsu the way, like in a non-sporting entertainment purist, like I just roll to roll and have these epiphanies on the mat, right? And feel like I've found something about myself, you know, and have like more of a internal, you know, and that could be very rewarding to somebody and could be the key to happiness.
You make it sound so like
Touchy-feely,
masturbatory.
new age. Well, there's always another person involved, so I don't know how much of that there is. But you could also have it as a sporting. People always want to say like this is the pure thing, or this is the best, or the highest, or the most legitimate, or the most. You know what I mean? Like
pure water jiu-jitsu.
I'm hesitant to say these things because I think that jiu-jitsu can be different things to different people, and I don't want to say like this may be more important to you or to that person or what have you.
Mhm.
Your priorities, everyone's priorities will be somewhat different, but that doesn't limit necessarily your perspective, which is totally, I'm not picking on you, but an individual's perspective of what they wish to attain, what their goals are, what they derive from jiu-jitsu, maybe legitimately the most important thing to them, but that doesn't make it the most important thing to everybody else.
Yeah.
And nor does it mean that the other thing that somebody else, like some people could say, look, here's a good perspective. You are wasting if you are going out and competing in sport jiu-jitsu, that is the biggest waste of time ever. You could make that argument. You could.
I thought you
I just
were
think
gonna
it's
do it.
stupid. I think it's stupid. You waste all this money. You don't get paid. You work your butt off. You get a cheap medal at the end of the day. Nobody knows who you are. You know, you're gonna get hurt. You know, there's no insurance. Whatever. You go out a million ways for it, right?
Great.
That's fine. But there are a lot of people who love sport jiu-jitsu, and their lives are made better through
Yeah.
sport jiu-jitsu. And I, you know, like, who are you? Or self-defense. There are people who say like, I want to do jiu-jitsu because I want to do it for self-defense. Whatever limited ability it gives me in a self-defense scenario is what I really want.
Yeah.
And
It works.
who am I to say that they are wrong?
I'm not saying that it wouldn't work, but I feel like when we have our conversations, if I can pick on you a little bit, you tend to gravitate towards competition and the jiu-jitsu that appears in tournament contexts and like who are the best people. And I think you've argued before that competition is a legitimizer for jiu-jitsu technique. And while I'm not disagreeing with
I don't know
that
how else
idea,
you would do it. I don't know how else you would. I mean, if you're
but
gonna. Okay.
but like jiu-jitsu happens in tournaments, but it happens not in tournaments too. And I think
Yes.
that the majority of jiu-jitsu happens in academies and happens
But you
in
can,
workshops.
so the thing is that that's true, right? And I definitely have had, I've trained with people or watched people train, and you say like this person is doing something that is really good, right? Is remarkable, right? It's so good. They have this like this innovative way of thinking or doing or whatever it is, dealing with something. But it's because you don't have visibility into that, right? Like there's a million academies. I don't know what's going on in any of them. Whereas I can turn on the internet and go and watch the world championships, and I can get statistics on that.
Yeah.
So I think you're right? Like so, John, for example, was a great example. Like he never competed, but his students competed, his friends competed, but he never did. And we all thought when we were there, like this guy is really amazing. We're really lucky that he's here teaching us what he's doing and like what he's learning. And he came up with that all in kind of the way you're describing, on the mat and just sort of doing personal experimentation and research and then coming and testing it out. And this was all before you had the chance to like watch a lot of matches. He might coach somebody, he might like kind of work on something and show somebody something, and then they would go and use it in a tournament and come back and report and be like, yeah, that worked really well, or it sucked, or whatever. But when you try to verify, based on the information that you can gather, you have to look somewhere. And so
it is a very efficient source of quality technique because it's self-evident that it works, right? It works because it happened at this tournament at this level.
I guess
against these
I
people.
wouldn't say, and to the extent I maybe imply this, I would try to be careful about, everything that winds up working at high level of tournament. At one point was an idea or a concept here in the gym,
Yeah.
right? I mean, the leg drag didn't just magically appear.
But it had to
Right.
magically appear somewhere. Maybe it happened in the tournament.
It probably did not,
Probably.
right?
Yeah.
So I'm not saying it was impossible that it ever worked there.
But it's some specific environment or reason for a new technique has to happen. It's like a natural development.
If anything, maybe if it did occur at a tournament, that person would probably bring it back
and test
and
it
sort
out.
of keep working on it.
Yeah.
So it just, you can't see that. That's an invisible process to
Yeah.
anybody who's not part of that academy or in that circle of people who are kind of dealing with that situation or iterating on that technique. So I don't mean to suggest that the only thing that's important
Yeah.
is tournament level jiu-jitsu, or the only people who are the best are the ones who are winning, the highest tournaments or whatever, or whatever the biggest tournaments. I don't think that's true at all. I mean, the people who are winning aren't always the people that are the greatest innovators. Although sometimes they are. Sometimes the biggest innovators are the coaches or even the teammates who don't compete. Who are just the hard roles in the academy, and they come up with things, and the other person takes them and uses them. Right? I mean, I think there's probably more of that going on than there is of individuals who are just kind of coming up with stuff and being geniuses, on the mat, as well as, innovating in jiu-jitsu technique.
Yeah.
It's hard to be both.
It also makes me wonder how many good ideas have been had that were never popularized. There could be someone might have had the perfect technique for whatever problem that you're working on or whatever thing that you need, and you just will never have access to it, and you'll never know what it is, and it happened and it's gone.
There's a lot of things where people have something that is very good, right? Like Jake McKenzie is one of my favorite guys. You know, he was in Lucas Lepre's division for like 10 years, and he would win 6 matches, 7, whatever it is, in every tournament.
Hit that guy.
And then he would run into Lucas Lepre,
Yeah.
right? And everybody knows who Lucas Lepre is, and very few people know who Jacob McKenzie. I mean, probably a lot more than when he was actually competing. I mean, he still competes, but when he was really, you know, contending for the adult world championship, you know, in the black belt weight division.
Mm-hmm.
But my point is that, like, he does some very good things.
Yeah.
He has a lot. If you like, I've watched his instructionals. He has a lot of really cool stuff that he teaches. But I don't know that people really have taken him as seriously in terms of the techniques that he uses. Because why? Because he gets destroyed by Lucas Lepre every time he runs into him. It's the same thing with like Ryan Hall. Ryan Hall is amazing. Is an amazing technician. But people watch him get. You know, he went up. He had a match against Rafa Mendes. And he actually gave Rafa, I mean, I think he lost something like, it wasn't that close, but it wasn't that, he didn't get tapped. I think, you know, I think Rafa may have swept him, may have passed him for a second or something, but it was a tough match. It's one of the few times that I've seen Rafa, like,
Try.
well, no, he worked hard, but one of the few times where he actually, kind of showed an appreciation for his opponent.
Huh.
Like, hey man, that was really good. Like, he kind of showed some, I mean, he respects everybody, but it was like
More.
it was very much like,
Genuine.
that was a tough match, you know, like, but he lost.
Yeah.
You know, Ryan Hall lost. So
Yeah,
like,
but it's Ryan Hall. He's still Ryan Hall.
you know,
Ryan
he's
Hall's-
amazing, but I'm saying, like, I'm not sure that he gets, I mean, he is very well known and recognized. No one's crying any tears for him. He's
Like
not
the-
laboring in anonymity.
But he could be the Van Gogh of Jiu-Jitsu, right? Laboring in obscurity, sad,
There's
half an ear.
There are a lot of reasons that you could lose in jiu-jitsu that have nothing to do with like the effectiveness of your technique.
Yeah.
You know, you can there seems to be in any division or any era a guy who
There are definitely more.
you can't get these things to work against.
There are more ways to lose than to win.
Yes, it's very hard to win. It's very easy to lose.
I think. Probably.
All right, enough. Go home. It's over. We're done. Have we solved all the problems of jiu-jitsu? Kevin, are we done?
I think so.
Is there anything else you want to talk about before I turn off the TV or the interwebs?
No.
All right. Till tomorrow.